Paris, France. May 25, 2026. Roland Garros had already seen drama, upsets, and 5-set battles during the opening week, but nothing inside the tournament carried the emotional weight of Alex Ila's first-round loss. By the time the final point landed, court Suzanne Lenglen had gone completely silent. Not normal tennis silence. Shock silence. The kind where 15,000 people suddenly stop moving because they cannot believe what they just watched. For nearly 3 hours, Alex Ila had fought through one of the toughest matches of her young career against China's Wang Xingyu, the number 31 seed, and the same player who had broken her heart months earlier in Auckland. That earlier loss had stayed with Ila throughout the season. She talked openly about wanting another shot at Wang on a big stage. Roland Garros gave her the opportunity. The atmosphere made it feel less like a first-round match and more like a final. Filipino fans had flooded the grounds hours before the match even started. Flights from Manila, London, Dubai, Rome, and Madrid had brought overseas supporters into Paris wearing flags wrapped around their shoulders. Some had spent savings just to watch her play one match live at Roland Garros. Others waited outside the gates before sunrise, hoping to get resale tickets. Tournament officials privately admitted the demands surrounding Ila's matches had become one of the most unexpected stories of the event. And once the match started, the pressure inside the stadium became enormous. Ila opened aggressively, stepping inside the baseline and attacking Wang's second serve early. The first set became a brutal exchange of momentum swings, long rallies, and emotional crowd reactions. Every time Ila won a point, chants of "Laban Alex" thundered across the court. Every missed opportunity created audible gasps from fans who desperately wanted her breakthrough moment in Paris. The match itself was exhausting. 3 sets. Momentum changes everywhere. Wang's power against Ila's movement and counterpunching. At times, Ila looked ready to take control completely. Then Wang would answer with fearless shot-making under pressure. Tennis analysts later described it as one of the highest-quality women's matches of the opening round because neither player backed away mentally. What made the loss so painful for Ila's supporters was how close she came. She did not get blown off the court. She was not outclassed physically. In several stretches, she looked like the better player. That is why the scoreline felt cruel. A few points here. One service game there. A missed opportunity under pressure. At the highest level of tennis, entire careers can turn on moments that last less than 10 seconds. When Wang finally closed it out, the celebration on one side of the net contrasted sharply with the silence everywhere else. Filipino flags slowly dropped in the stands. Some fans sat frozen staring at the clay. Others wiped tears away while applauding anyway. Ila stood near the baseline breathing heavily, staring toward the crowd as if she was trying to process how a match she came so close to winning had slipped away again. But the real shock came afterward. Inside the Roland Garros press room, reporters expected a predictable post-match interview. Most athletes after painful losses stick to safe answers. They talk about learning experiences, missed opportunities, and focusing on the next tournament. Ila walked into the room looking emotionally drained. Her eyes were red. Her voice sounded strained. The exhaustion from the match was visible in every movement. Then she leaned toward the microphone and changed the entire tone of the room. "I played well enough to win," she said quietly. "Something else beat me." The room froze instantly. Reporters looked at each other, trying to understand what she meant. Some thought she was referring to nerves. Others wondered if she was talking about pressure, injuries, fatigue, or even the overwhelming atmosphere surrounding her rise. The answer never came immediately, which only intensified the moment, because the truth was visible to anyone who had watched her season closely. By May of 2026, Alex Ila was carrying pressure that went far beyond rankings and tennis tactics. She had become a national story in the Philippines and a rapidly growing international name in women's tennis. Every tournament now carried expectations. Every match produced headlines. Every loss triggered intense online reactions. At just 20 years old, she was learning what it felt like to compete while millions of people emotionally invested themselves into every point she played. And Roland Garros magnified all of it. This was not some quiet first-round match hidden on an outside court. This was one of the most watched matches of the opening week because Ila had become one of the breakout attractions of the tournament. Broadcasters talked about her constantly. Social media clips from her practices went viral. Fans followed her around the grounds like she was already a Grand Slam champion. For a young athlete still learning how to manage emotional swings at the highest level, that kind of spotlight can become exhausting very quickly. Some veteran analysts later pointed out that Ela appeared emotionally overloaded at critical moments during the match. Not weak. Not unprepared. Overloaded. There is a difference. The body can handle pressure for a while. Eventually, the mind starts carrying weight too heavy to ignore. Especially in a sport like tennis, where there are no teammates to absorb momentum when things begin unraveling. And yet even in defeat, something important happened that day. The crowd never abandoned her. As Ela stood to leave the court, thousands of Filipino fans rose together and applauded continuously. They did not care that the result ended in heartbreak. They understood what they had witnessed. A 20-year-old player fighting under enormous pressure against a seeded opponent on one of the sport's biggest stages and refusing to collapse mentally even when the match turned against her. That is why the atmosphere after the loss felt so emotional. Fans were not mourning failure. They were reacting to how close she looked to becoming something even bigger. In sports, people recognize when an athlete crosses the line from promising to special. Even in defeat, Ela looked like someone approached. Roland Garros had seen 5-set classics, emotional collapses, and legendary comebacks over the decades, but what unfolded after Ela's loss to Wang Xingyu felt different. It did not feel like the end of a first-round match. It felt like the breaking point of pressure that had been building around one young player for months. The battle on the red clay had already drained everyone inside the stadium. Two young stars pushed each other past the edge physically and emotionally. Long rallies. Momentum swings. Break points that changed entire sets. Every game carried tension because the crowd could feel how badly both players wanted it. Wang Xingyu eventually survived the storm. The scoreboard read 3-6, 7-6, 6-3. On paper, it looked like a hard-fought comeback victory. Inside the stadium, it felt far heavier than that. As Wang celebrated quietly near the baseline, the atmosphere around court Suzanne Lenglen shifted instantly. Philippine flags that had filled the stands for hours slowly disappeared into bags and jackets. Fans who had screamed themselves hoarse moments earlier now stood silent, staring toward court. Some applauded. Others simply watched Ela walk toward the tunnel with her head lowered and shoulders heavy from exhaustion. This was not just another young player losing an early round match. By 2026, Ela had become one of the biggest stories in women's tennis. The 20-year-old Filipina had transformed from rising prospect into international phenomenon in a matter of months. Crowds followed her across Europe. Ticket demand for her matches surged tournament after tournament. In Rome, fans treated her like a homegrown star despite being thousands of miles from Manila. In Paris, entire sections of Roland Garros turned into unofficial Philippine cheering sections every time she stepped on court. And with that attention came pressure that few players her age ever experience. The expectations surrounding Ela had grown enormous entering Roland Garros. She was no longer just representing herself. Millions of fans viewed her success as something personal. Overseas Filipino workers traveled across countries just to support her. Families woke up in the middle of the night in Manila to watch every match. Young tennis players across Southeast Asia suddenly saw her as proof that someone from their region could compete with the sport's elite. That emotional weight followed her into every point against Wang Xingyu. Inside the media center after the match, reporters expected the usual routine. Athletes lose painful matches all the time. Most press conferences sound nearly identical afterward. Players talk about lessons learned, credit their opponents, and promise to improve. But the moment Ela entered the room, journalists sensed something different immediately. She looked emotionally exhausted. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen red. Her voice sounded strained from hours of tension and physical effort. In the back of the room sat her mother, Riza, hands clasped tightly together, while quietly watching her daughter try to hold herself together in front of cameras from around the world. Then came the moment that changed the entire atmosphere. Ela leaned toward the microphone slowly and stared directly ahead before speaking. The room fell silent immediately because everyone could hear emotion underneath her voice. This no longer sounded like a rehearsed athlete response. It sounded raw. She spoke about fighting hard enough to win. About feeling prepared physically and tactically. About believing she had control of the match at certain moments. Then she paused and admitted something that instantly sent reporters scrambling to type every word. "I played well enough to win," she said quietly. "Something else beat me." The room froze. For several seconds nobody asked a question because reporters were trying to understand exactly what she meant. Was she talking about nerves? Pressure? Expectations? Mental fatigue? The emotional burden of becoming a national sports icon at 20 years old? The power of the comment came from a fact that millions of people watching already suspected the answer. Because Alex Ila's rise had happened incredibly fast. One breakthrough tournament became two. Then came international headlines, celebrity attention, sponsorships, non-stop social media attention, and expectations that grew larger every week. Every victory became national news. Every loss became emotional debate online. At an age when most athletes are still learning how to survive tour life quietly, Ila was carrying the attention usually reserved for global superstars. Veteran tennis analysts later pointed out that her body language shifted late in the second set when momentum began turning. Not because she stopped competing, but because the emotional weight started becoming visible. Elite tennis is brutally mental. One missed point can stay inside a player's head for games afterward. The greatest champions in history often describe pressure as physically exhausting, not just emotionally difficult. And yet, even after the loss, the reaction from fans showed how much Ila's connection with people had already grown beyond wins and losses. Outside the stadium, hundreds of supporters waited near the player exits, hoping to see her for even a few seconds. Many were crying openly. Others waved flags and continued chanting, "Laban Alex," long after the match ended. Some fans later admitted they felt heartbroken not because she lost, but because they could see how deeply the defeat hurt her personally. That response revealed something important about her growing influence. Fans were no longer attached only to results. They were emotionally invested in her journey. They saw the pressure. They saw the sacrifices. They saw the exhaustion behind the smile and interviews. And instead of turning away after defeat, many became even more supportive. Inside tennis circles, the match against Wang Xinyu quickly became one of the most discussed stories of the opening week. Not because of controversy. Not because of drama between players. Because it exposed the emotional reality young stars face once global attention arrives faster than expected. Some athletes spend years gradually adjusting to fame and pressure. Ila's rise happened almost overnight. And sitting quietly in the back of that press room was her mother, Riza, watching her daughter navigate a moment far bigger than a single tennis match.